A very good evening to all of you present here. In this video, I will discuss about circulatory system. This topic is very important. Like in my earlier videos, I have discussed about various types of systems that you have your digestive system, respiratory system. Now, circulatory system is also very important, and the main advantage of this topic is that you will be able to learn the theory very much easily, because from the diagram only you can connect to the topics. So the basic thing when we talk about circulatory system, or the first picture which clicks to our mind is of the heart. Now before I start, first of all we should know what is heart. A heart is basically a pear shaped muscular organ which is located in the chest cavity of your body. What is heart? A heart is a pear shaped muscular organ located in the chest cavity of your body, and it is basically the size of a clenched fist. You can see that there is a diagram of a heart, and it is basically the size of a clenched fist. The size of the heart, if I talk about, it is 12 centimeter in length and 9 centimeter in breadth. It basically weighs about 300 grams, and the heart is basically made up of from some special muscles known as the cardiac muscles. Now what is the advantage of these muscles? That they work tirelessly, and because they work tirelessly, the heart keeps moving. Right, this is the special advantage of these muscles. Similarly, the heart is enclosed in a double layered sac membrane called pericardium, which is having pericardial fluid. Now, some students get confused between these two names. Membrane is known as pericardium, and fluid is known as pericardial fluid. The function of pericardial fluid is that it protects the heart from jerks and all. Now, you must have seen that all the important organs in our body are basically protected by some or the other fluid. Similarly, heart is also having a protective covering. Now, heart has four chambers. Heart has four chambers like your auricles, right? This is the right auricle, right ventricle, right? Similarly, over here is your left auricle and left ventricle. All these ventricles and auricles are separated from each other in order to prevent mixing of the blood, of the pure and the impure blood. Now, heart has also other important components like your blood vessels, septum, and valves. First of all, I will discuss about auricles. Friends, auricles are basically known as these are basically the upper chambers of the heart. These are basically, over here is the right auricle, over here is the left auricle, right? These are basically known as the upper chambers of the heart, and they are basically known as the receiving chambers. Why I am saying that they are basically known as the receiving chambers? Because blood from all parts of the body, now it is basically impure blood, it comes to the right auricle first, and that is why, since it receives it, so it is known as the receiving chambers of the heart. They are basically made up of thin walls. The singular of arteries is atrium. Now, ventricles. Over here is the right ventricle, and over here is your left ventricle. These are basically the downward chambers of the heart, and they are known as the discharging chambers. Why I am saying, friends, that they are known as the discharging chambers? Because they discharge the blood, right? For example, if I talk about right ventricle, it discharges the blood into the pulmonary artery, right? Right ventricle to the, left ventricle to the aorta. Fine. Now a question arises over here, why they are made up of thick walls. They are made up of thick walls because blood flows into the ventricles under a very high grade pressure. So in order to pass or to counter that pressure and to enable the blood to flow easily, they are basically made up of through thick walls. Now I will discuss about septum. Fine. Septum, if I talk about, like, for example, this is auricle and this is ventricle. So this, like I have made over a line, this thick muscular wall is known as septum. It separates auricles and the ventricles, right? The auricles are separated from each other through auricular septum. The ventricles are separated from each other through ventricular septum. Now, this is the internal structure of the heart. Now I will discuss about valves. Now see friends, in this diagram, for example, this is your tricuspid valve over here and this is your bicuspid valve over here. There are two more valves but I have not drawn in this diagram. Now tricuspid valve is basically present between the right auricle and right ventricle, and the bicuspid valve is present between the left auricle and left ventricle. Now sometimes students actually gets confused between where these two valves are present. That is why I made this diagram. See, tricuspid valve is present between what? Right auricle and right ventricle. Bicuspid valve between left auricle and left ventricle. Now, what are valves? Valves basically regulate the flow of blood from the auricles to the ventricles. That is why in this diagram you can see, like, over here is the auricles and over here are the ventricles. So, blood moves from the auricles to the ventricles. By bicuspid valve also from left auricle to the left ventricle. They are like doors which opens in one direction. For example, if blood will come over here, these valves will get open like this and blood will flow. Now, about tricuspid and bicuspid valve I have already discussed. Now there are two other valves, the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. The pulmonary valve is basically present at the base of the pulmonary artery. It regulates the blood between from right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. Similarly, if I talk about aortic valve is basically present at the point of origin of the aorta. It regulates the flow of blood from the left ventricle to the aorta. From to the aorta. Now, let me go to the next frame. SA nodes. SA nodes, the full form is synotrial nodes. Now friends, sometimes a cluster of cells are present in the upper part of the right auricle. A cluster of cells are present, that is, a cluster of cells are present in the upper part of the right auricle, and these are known as the synotrial nodes. Now, synotrial nodes coordinates the heartbeat by generating what? By generating your electrical impulses. Remember, these nodes generate electrical impulses for the coordination of the heartbeat so that heart could beat, right? Now, if there is any defect or if there is any abnormal functioning of SA nodes, the heart rhythm can be either too fast, no, slow, or a combination of both. So see, slow, fast and combination of both. These are predefined facts. So kindly I request you that while in your any examination or in any test, don't write that slow or very slow, very fast. No, only slow, fast and a combination of both. These are predefined facts, right? Now, over here in this diagram, you can see that flow of blood. I have shown that this is right auricle. That this diagram everyone knows, but for example, if you get confused in any type of question which is connected to the flow of blood, you can always draw this diagram and can remember. Like for example, this vena cava comes, right auricle, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, pulmonary artery, lungs, pulmonary vein, left auricle, bicuspid valve, left ventricle, aorta, from the aorta to the various body parts. Now, The blood vessels which are entering now, before I discuss blood pressure, I have to discuss many things. Now let me show you what things I have to discuss, friends. In this video, first I will discuss about vena cava, coronary arteries and veins, pulmonary arteries and veins, aorta, flow of blood, then pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation, heartbeat, pulse, and then blood pressure. Now, the blood vessels entering or leaving the heart are known as the great blood vessels. Now, if I talk about vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood, which is also known as the impure blood. Why it is known as the deoxygenated blood? Because the concentration of carbon dioxide gas is more as compared to oxygen, right? It brings the deoxygenated or the impure blood from all the parts of your body to the where to over here, right auricle, right? Now vena cava is also of two types: superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. Superior vena cava brings the blood from the anterior parts of the body, means from the upper parts of the body. The inferior vena cava brings the blood from the posterior parts of the body, means from the downward part of the body, that is below the abdomen, right? Now, I will discuss about coronary arteries and veins. The great blood vessels consist of the coronary arteries and veins. They are basically two main coronary arteries. The function of the coronary arteries is that it supplies the blood from the heart to various body parts, and the function of coronary veins is that it brings the deoxygenated blood back to the heart. Now, pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. Actually, pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein are basically a special and a rare case. Like arteries brings the blood, like what type of blood they bring? Arteries bring oxygenated blood, but pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood. Veins carry deoxygenated blood, but pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood. So these are the special rare cases. Aorta is the largest artery in our body. It is also known as the systemic aorta. It supplies the blood from the heart to various parts of the body except the lungs. Now I will tell you about flow of blood. This flow of blood I've already discussed. Now from the aorta, it further gets divided into tissues and supplies the blood into the cells. Now see, blood is basically a continuous flow. When the blood is passing through the cells, it supplies nutrients also, and it also collects waste material, brings back to the right auricle, completing one round of circulation. Now, for completing one round of circulation, friends, the blood has to travel twice through the heart. That is known as a double circulation. Now, double circulation is also of two types. That is your pulmonary circulation and a systemic circulation. The pulmonary circulation basically occurs between the heart and the lungs. Systemic occurs heart and the body. Now I will discuss about heartbeat. Now, as we know that when auricles contract, they supply the blood into the ventricles, they are empty. After a fraction of second later, the ventricles contract and supplies the blood into the pulmonary arteries and the aorta. Now what happens by this time? The auricles are emptied, but they are again filled by the blood coming from the pulmonary vein and the vena cava, and by this time ventricles have also been emptied and the whole heart relaxes. This is known as heartbeat. The sequence of events which takes place during one complete heartbeat is known as your cardiac cycle. A cardiac cycle involves repetition, contraction, and relaxation of the cardiac muscles, right? Now I will come to a very important thing about cardiac cycle. Remember, a cardiac cycle basically consists of one systole and one diastole. Systole is termed as contraction, diastole is termed as relaxation. In one complete cardiac cycle, if we talk about, there is one systole and one diastole which lasts for about 0.8 seconds. Now, there are two sounds made by them. Like a stronger sound it made by, first of all, a weaker sound is made by the contraction of auricles, followed by a stronger sound made by the contraction of ventricles. That is why doctor uses stethoscope to listen to these loved up sounds, right? Heartbeat is about, if talk about, so 75 times per minute. Now, if I talk about pulse rate, see when the left ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood into the arteries under high pressure, because of which the walls of the arteries they get stretched. When the pressure relaxes, when the left ventricle actually relaxes, the pressure also comes down. So this contraction and relaxation of arteries with each heartbeat is felt as throbbing. They are felt as what? They are felt as throbbing. Throbbing, right, on the heart. This is known as pulse. Your pulse is basically the rate at which your heart beats. You can feel it at the wrist, near the base of the thumb, or at the side of the neck. It is basically about 70 to 75 times per minute. Now I will discuss about blood pressure. Now, heart uses some pressure to push the blood into the blood vessels. So, the force or the pressure exerted by the blood against the arterial walls by the heart is known as blood pressure. Now, blood pressure is of two types, the upper limit and the lower limit. So, upper limit is systolic pressure, lower limit is diastolic pressure. Systolic pressure, if I talk about, the average pressure produced when the ventricles contract and pushes the blood into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. It is basically equal to the pressure exerted by one mercury column, that is 120 mmHg, millimeters of mercury. Now, and the average pressure produced when the blood flows, when the ventricles are get filled by the blood from the auricles, right? They are basically known as diastolic pressure, and it is about 80 mmHg. Now I will discuss about, now let me go to the next frame. Wait a minute. Now, sometimes due to some defect in the structural components of the heart and the blood vessels, there are basically, yes, fine. Now, sometimes due to some defects in the structural components of the heart and the blood vessels, uh, three types of diseases occurs. First is your palpitation. Second is your cardiac arrest, and third is your high blood pressure. If I talk about palpitation, so friends, palpitation basically occur due to some anxiety, coronary heart disease, or due to some effect of some medicine. Now, what happens in palpitation? You feel that your heart is beating too fast, skipping a beat, or it is fluttering. You can feel it in the chest, throat, or neck. Cardiac arrest. In cardiac arrest, what happens? You will feel that the heart stops beating. Why happens? Due to constriction, because of the narrowing of the arterial walls of the heart, and it basically occurs in the coronary arteries due to deposition of cholesterol and calcium. Now, some students create an error, and this I have also experienced within myself, that they write cholesterol, calcium, and fats. Fats you don't have to write, you have to only write two specific things, that is your cholesterol and your calcium. That's it, okay? Now, because of this, what happens? The walls of the arteries becomes very much thin, and it creates difficulty for the blood to flow. High blood pressure. High blood pressure, if I talk about, so high blood pressure basically occurs due to constriction of arterioles. When there's constriction in the arterioles, the high blood pressure occurs. And in these days, because due to luxurious lifestyle or not in the discipline in the lifestyle, most of the people have blood pressure above the normal value. That is why it is always advised by the doctors that you should do exercises and maintain a healthy lifestyle. Effects of high blood pressure can be night blindness, some of the renal problems, and brain stroke, the main immediate cause. Blood groups. Before I start blood groups, let me discuss, I give an intro about it. If I talk about blood groups, right? If I talk about blood groups, so what happens is that sometimes due to some surgery or if we got hit, there is blood loss from a body. It can be either made by transferring blood from a healthy person. The transfusion of blood from one person to another is known as blood transfusion. What it is known as? It is known as blood transfusion. Now, but the person who transfers the blood known as the donor and the person who receives the blood is known as the recipient. Blood is further divided into the four blood groups and the rhesus factor. Now, blood groups, if I talk about, so two main things comes, it must click your mind, that is antigens and antibodies. What are, friends, antigens? Antigens are basically your large protein molecules present on the surface of RBCs. What are antibodies? Antibodies are basically protein only and it is present in plasma. Now, some this error only I want to show you. Now I have said that antibodies are protein. No, friends, they are no, protein word is not there in this. So kindly while writing your answer, never include this word protein. Everything will wrong. So just write simple definition. Antibodies are present in plasma. That's it. If you will include some extra word on your own, so in your school, so marks will not be cut. But if you will go at higher classes or if you will apply for competitive exams, your marks can be cut, because in biology everything is fact. So you don't have to add or you don't have to delete any word, only remember keywords. Fine. Now, due to some absence or presence of some specific antigens, the blood group is divided into four groups: antigen blood group A, B, AB, and O. A antigen A, antibody B, B antigen B, antibody A, O no antigens, only antibodies, AB two and both antigens, no antibodies. Now, when you're transferring the blood, so always remember that if there is antigen, if there is any opposite antigen in the blood, and if it is transferred into the recipient body, so what will happen that the recipient body will develop antibodies against it. It can attack it, can even cause clumping, and it is very much fatal. So while doing any blood transfusion, always match the blood group of the donor and the recipient and the RH negative factor. Why I am saying that RH negative should also be matched, because RH negative can give blood to RH positive but cannot take from it. Now, in this theory, I have discussed the word clumping. What happens clumping? For example, if antigen A cannot transfer blood to antibody B, antigen B cannot transfer blood to antibody B. This is known as self clumping, right? So while transferring blood, this should also not happen. Antigen A can only transfer to blood antibody B. Antigen B can transfer blood to antibody A. Now, what are antigens? I'm giving you further information about it. Antigens are basically large protein molecules present on the surface of the RBCs, bacteria, non-living substances like toxins and chemicals. Antigens stimulate the body to produce some antibodies. Antibodies are basically produced in response to some antigens, and they basically bind a specific antigen which are keyed as to a lock. Now I will discuss about rhesus factor. This is the last topic, and tomorrow in the next video I will discuss about lymphatic system. Now, what is rhesus factor? Rhesus factor is also basically present RH factor, but is known, and it is also present in the surface of RBCs only. About it has been characterized, or it has been found from rhesus monkeys. 85% have RH positive, 15% have RH negative. Now, While the transfusion of the blood takes place between Rh positive and Rh negative, you don't have to only match the blood group, but also you have to see the positive and the negative types, right? For example, if Rh, if there is any mistransfusion in the blood, right? So at the first transfusion, what will happen, that nothing will happen, right? Like so much it will not be fatal because antibodies are very much short lived, they don't react at first time. But if same error occurs in the next transfusion, so the antibodies will attack and it could be fatal. That is why I am again repeating, if you are doing any blood transfusion, first of all match the blood group and Rh negative, because I am again repeating, Rh negative can give blood to Rh positive but cannot take blood from it. With this I end my video. I hope that you must have understood, and tomorrow in the next video I will discuss about lymphatic system. By the time, thank you, have a nice